right, according to YouTube, we're live. So good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. In this live session as part of Delta Hack, which is a Delta Lake open source hackathon that we are hosting from now until the end of the week, I wanted to share some of how you can get started with Rust. We'll be using Delta RS, and let me go ahead and open that up. Delta RS as the basis for this video. I wanted to share how to create a pull request, but sort of starting from the perspective of, I've never written Rust before. Delta RS is a project that we started maybe last year. I'm losing track of time. But Delta RS is a project that adds Rust and Python bindings and has the potential to add more bindings to Delta Lake for, say Ruby or Golang or Node, etc. What this allows us to do is to really access Delta tables from a non-Spark context, or more specifically, a non-JVM context. So might as well go ahead and get started. If you've got questions, I do have chat up. I'm looking at it in the side. Of course, if you have chats after this video has already been posted and I'm no longer live streaming, if you go to delta.io and I think it's under resources, I can actually show you. What am I thinking? Delta.io. You can join us on Slack. Where's the Slack button? Community. Get up. Down here at the bottom. Slack channel, Google group, YouTube. The Slack channel, if you join the Delta-RS channel, you'll be able to ask the Delta RS folks any questions that you may have. But anyways, so if you haven't worked in Rust before, the first place I would recommend that you go is rustup.rs. A lot of operating systems will provide Rust packages. For example, I'm running on OpenSUSE. And there are Rust packages, but I find that RustUp is an easier and a more, I would say, reliable way to keep up to date with Rust packages. And once you pipe some curl into your shell, I definitely do not recommend running this as root, but for your user, you will get cargo and rustc and a lot of the tools that come along with it. So here I've got cargo and I've got rustc, and so on this machine I've got the cargo and Rust toolchain already installed. I'm going to be using Vim. VS Code has some really good support. IntelliJ also has good Rust support nowadays. Vim also. Vim certainly has good Rust support, so I recommend Vim as well. I can't speak to Emacs. I won't get into that particular flame war at the moment. But once you've got Rust installed, a couple of resources that I recommend you checking out. The book, the Rust Programming Language book from No Starch, which was written by Steve and Carol Nichols, or Steve Klabnik and Carol Nichols. It's a very, very good book. I recommend purchasing it. I purchased it. I've had a number of colleagues that have as well, and it helped them really come up to speed on Rust. A lot of the content, however, is also available on doc.rustlang.org, which you'll see here. This is, frequently updated from the community, whereas the actual paper copy obviously isn't, because that's not how printing works. So anyways, I wanted to pick a pull request, or make a pull request, excuse me. I wanted to pick an issue that we have here in Delta RS. And if you come to the Delta RS repository, you'll notice we have quite the Technicolor Dreamcoat of issues listed here. But the purple one is what we want to focus on, as the purple ones are all the good first issues. And these are issues that are, slight improvements or minor changes that could be made to Delta RS that we think, as the Delta RS committers, would be a good place for someone that's either unfamiliar with Rust or unfamiliar with Delta Lake to get started with. I'm not going to really introduce Delta Lake, by the way. Delta Lake, Denny did a good session, which is in the YouTube channel now, early this morning, sort of introducing the Zen and art of Delta Lake. And there's some really good sessions from the Data and AI Summit that was hosted a couple of weeks ago, which I also encourage you to watch. But I was looking at an issue earlier that I thought would be a good candidate. Add context to errors, which I think Serge filed. Yeah, this is, so 267 is the issue that I'm gonna work on for this. It's a fairly simple issue in that we have some errors that just don't really tell the user much about what's going on. And we should fix that. So like most projects that are, or all projects that are hosted on GitHub, if you want to work with it, you got to clone it. I'm not going to go into Git stuff here, but let's go ahead and go into the root, and let's make sure I'm up to date. Yep. So let's create a branch for working in. I like to give my branch the issue number that I'm working on. So we'll do better errors 267. And when you look at the Delta RS tree, we have it's a, what's the word for it? It's a multi-member workspace project in Rust, which means if you look at cargo toml, and every Rust project that you'll find will have a cargo toml, which describes the project and describes the dependencies, we see that it's a workspace and that there's these members of the workspace: Rust, Ruby, Python, glibc version, which we probably should refactor out. But I want to focus on the Rust binding. So I'm going to go into the Rust directory. And here, this is, I don't know what foo is, but this directory is pretty much what a typical Rust project might look like. You'll have a README, you'll have a cargo toml, source, you might have some integration tests as well. Well, let's look at the cargo toml just to give you an idea of what lives here. Cargo tomls in most projects will define kind of three things: project metadata, which you see up here at the top, or package metadata, excuse me. I would say package. The dependencies for that package. In this case, we've got quite a number of dependencies. And then you'll find features. There's other things that can go into the cargo toml, but pretty much these three are what you're going to encounter more often than not when you're using Rust. The features are a way for us to, we won't talk too much about features, but features are a way for us to have sort of conditional compilation. So we can build Rust, or the Delta RS package, with the Azure feature, and that will build in the Azure support, or with the S3 feature, the S3 support, so on and so forth. So we have all the Rust files go into source, src, source. And one of the things that trips up a lot of folks when they get involved in Rust is that Rust files are modules. So if you're coming from Ruby, for example, Ruby has open classes and modules. You can actually define a class, for example, in multiple files. In Java or Scala or Groovy or things like that, there is a little bit more of a file to module convention, but it's not as strict as what Rust has. So let me look at librs as an example. So here we're actually declaring what modules we want to pull in and build as part of what we're doing here. And the modules are actually, if we didn't have this pub modifier, they wouldn't be exposed outside of the package. So, users can't use them. So for example, mod delta, a user can't, with the exception of the things that we're exposing here, a user can't, pull in the Delta Lake crate and use stuff under there. Whereas action or Delta arrow or partitions, those have the public modifier on them. Let's go look at our issue here. Of course, if you have any questions, please stop me, mention something in the YouTube chat, and I'll be able to try to answer those questions. I also apologize if I'm talking pretty fast. There's a lot I want to do. So this error, I don't know where this error he's referring to is. I think I know where it's defined. But let's look at auto table. All right, it's defined in delta RS. That's what I thought. So in delta RS, this is in the source directory, source delta RS, this is the delta module. This is quite a large file in delta RS. I use a tool, let me make this pane bigger. I'm using Tmux here, but I use a tool with Vim called tagbar that I can integrate with Rust files to make it easy to jump around to functions, structures, etc. And yeah, tools like this in VS Code, Vim, or IntelliJ are quite helpful, especially when you've got larger Rust projects or large Rust modules. So in this case, I'm looking for, I think it's the enumeration delta table error where we have these things defined. I'm going to open up Cargo Toml because there's a crate here that I want to recommend. I think it's anyhow. Anyhow, if I'm remembering which one this is. Not anyways, anyhow. I'm pretty sure this is the error crate that I'm thinking of. Yeah. So anyhow is a very useful sort of error management crate in Rust, which I'd encourage you to check out, because a key difference between Rust and C++, Java, Ruby, Python is Rust doesn't have exceptions. Contrasted to Golang or C, it also doesn't really have like error number or what I'll call is typically this self-reference, and then the version argument. But the return type is actually this result. And result you'll see in all sorts of Rust code, where the result is going to be this top-level thing that has sort of the OK branch and the error branch. And this is a generic type result. And so our OK branch will be an option checkpoint type, and our error branch will be a delta table or management of that result. Other people will just unwrap if they're not expecting, if the error is actually fatal, like what we have here. But result is how errors are going to be propagated out of calls in Rust. So the problem that Serge was reporting, this was on not a table. It's basically that not a table doesn't have any information associated with it. And so let's look at just apply log as an example. There's this macro, which is the $ bracket syntax. Those are macros in Rust, which are a very, they're nothing like C macros. I think they're macros done right. They're very, very good. And they're used quite frequently with great effect in the Rust ecosystem. But this macro is an anyhow macro. And when we pass this error, use this error macro, basically says, here's the string that we're going to print when we get this error. And we can do some string formatting. And it's basically some clever syntax to say, when I get a source error, I want to put the source error in the string to represent the issue. And then there's this from, which is also a useful anyhow macro, which will do, it's not exactly type coercion, but it'll basically allow us to create an apply log, was I saying any log? Apply log error from an apply log error that, apply log from apply log error that we might get. This is really useful when wrapping URI error or other errors that come from other errors that come from other crates. We can just wrap it and say, if we ever have a function that gets, a assert.json error, then let's wrap it up and convert it to a delta table error so that our API is fairly consistent in terms of the errors that it reports. So where is not a table? There's not a table, not a delta table. So we actually have all of these. There's this set of four errors that don't really have any information coming along with them. So I need to find out where Serge has this, or where Serge saw this. So this is self version. Let's just see. Let me do a mark there, mark, not a table. So there's one spot. Oh, we're only using it in one spot. Okay, so when we're applying logs after current version, the way that Delta RS works, by the way, is when we're reading the transaction log, we sort of iterate through the transaction log and apply the different actions, which is where some of this code is coming up. So no snapshot found, no version news. This is not a Delta table, possibly an empty directory. So we've got this comment here, which I think would make a pretty good error message. So let me split my view a little bit so I can keep both where the call is being used and where this is being. All right, I should explain what I'm doing here. So all of these errors are wrapped up in this enumeration. Enumerations in Rust are really powerful. You can have sort of different types of things in the same enumeration, which is what we have here to make our error reporting more easy to use. Here's my not a table. And inside of an enumeration, we can have sort of a struct definition, or what looks like a struct definition, where we have, this is our symbol, invalid action, and then we have one member of the name source inside of that has this type. That's sort of a struct definition. Struct is another type in Rust. There's another syntax which is quite helpful, and we use it in a number of enums in Delta RS, which is basically to create sort of like a tuple type. So when I create this not a table, just as an example, with a single entry in the tuple of string, then if I've got error, let error equals some func, that's going to give me my error. Let's say this just is going to return a not a table. Then if I wanted to print that, I would just say, and that's how I actually call into that. If I have multiple strings here, then there's a .0 and a .1 member on that tuple. But I only need the one. So let's just do one. And what this means, I'm going to go ahead and save this and let's build. So cargo is the tool. Cargo is the #1 tool. You will use cargo for all the things. Did my stream lock up? Let me on the view in YouTube, it's definitely looking locked up. Let's see here. So with cargo, I gotta go double check this, see what I'm getting. That doesn't look like my stream locked up. It looks like YouTube's web UI is just bad. The things that you're typically going to be executing with cargo will be build, test, and run. Fairly straightforward. I mean, cargo will also install packages for you, or binaries. You can also do cargo update. All of these things are quite useful, but build, test, and run. When I'm working, I use a crate called cargo watch, which I'll pull up here. I don't remember what the actual crate name is called, so let me search for it. I think it's just cargo-watch. Let's see. Load. That's not crates.io. I didn't know crate.io was a thing. I suppose that stands to reason. Yeah, cargo watch. So if you just do a cargo install of cargo watch, you'll get this very helpful tool, which will let you rerun targets. So these cargo targets, just whenever files change. And cargo build is what I'm gonna execute. So this is going to build all my stuff, and this will take a little bit. I haven't built Delta RS in a while because we have all of these dependencies. The compilation can take a while, but Rust C, which is the compiler underneath this, does support incremental compilation. So the second time around, it's only going to build the modules that have changed, basically. But if you're coming from Python or Ruby or JavaScript, Rust is a little bit more, I mean, it's a compiled language, certainly. You will notice your compile times a little bit more than, your load all the modules time, or, load Rails time that you might have with a Ruby project. So while this compiles, I'm going to go self-assign this, since I'm working on it. Make sure nobody else starts working on it. Well, build. Build all the things. I'm looking at some of the YouTube stream, and unfortunately the rendering doesn't look so great. It could be better. So maybe I'll learn from this and make the next one better. Can I make this? I think I can just embiggen this. There we go. Embiggened. We'll go full screen on this, so we'll get a little bit clearer of text, hopefully, from OBS and YouTube. So basically, I changed not a table to where it's now just, instead of an empty enum variant, it is now a tuple, and I've got to do something with that now. Stands to reason. So 5. So is anyhow only used once. The way that these macros work is they basically will define some additional traits and some additional implementations around this enum. And so I wouldn't say it's only used once, because it actually, let me show you down here. Here's a very good example of we're actually using, when we do this delta table error from, we're actually using some of the traits that are being defined by this from macro that anyhow is providing. So it's being used multiple times. It's only going to be compiled once because it's compiling out these trait implementations. So I hope that answers the question. And it's a patatas. I recognize this patatas. Patatas del Papa is someone that has joined my Twitch stream, which if you go to twitch.tv/agentdarrow, I do hack on Delta RS sometimes and stream it because I got nothing better to do. Is this error a different thing? You're right. Anyhow, and this error, so my mistake. Thank you, Patatas del Papa, for pointing out my mistake. So this error and anyhow are being used together in the crate. I honestly don't remember the distinction, but like where the differences are between them. So this error and anyhow, quite useful. But anyways, so this call site, I need to add this string in, so my compile error goes away. What is this? So I'm just going to create this enum variant, and let's see if I can compile this. No, I cannot compile this because I screwed up my parens somewhere. There we go. And so Cargo Watch is obviously going to be rebuilding it. Uh-oh, it's QP. QP is the original creator of Delta RS. So if I say something stupid, since he's paying attention, then I'll let him correct me. So this actually compiled, which is quite helpful. We could stop here, commit, and make that the end of it, and submit our pull request and call it a day. But compilation and testing are different things, and Delta RS is a project that does have quite a few tests and unit tests and integration tests. So I also want to make sure that I run cargo test before I commit this. The way that tests are actually implemented is unit test. I'll speak first to unit test. Is at the bottom of most files. People typically put these at the bottom. You'll see this mod tests or mod test. It doesn't really matter what it's called, but it gets put behind this configuration test macro, which means in the normal build, this code is not built. In a test build, which is what cargo test is going to do for us, this code will be included, and then the test macro actually denotes our unit tests. Because the module in Rust is, fully isolated, the only way that we can test non-exported, public methods or private methods that are not exported via the pub modifier, like this crate version here, is to actually put the test inside that module, and then this fancy syntax of use super is going to pull those into the scope of the test module down here. Anyways, long story short, let's implement the thing or run the test. So part of the reason I wanted to run the test is because I was sure that there was a test that actually was going to look for this error. If I would have committed this and pushed it up as a pull request, the GitHub Actions would have told me, you're not doing something right. This test, however, is in the integration tests, which are in the test directory. Integration tests can't use anything that's not publicly, that doesn't have the pub on it, so it doesn't have the modifier. But they're really useful for writing tests for how users are actually going to use the crate. And so we have assert matches result unwrap error. I think I don't actually care about the string. We don't need to do any assertion on that. I think this will work. So let me run the test again. Compile. As some folks that have seen me do some programming on Twitch know that I complain about this frequently, I do most of my Rust hacking on Arch64. The linker and the compiler are not as optimized yet for Arch64. The M1 Max, I hope, will make that or change that. But yeah. So now my tests have passed. Not just my unit tests, my integration tests. So everything is looking great. One thing that I like to do, you can set up your IDE or your editor to do this for you. You can also set up a pre-commit hook. There's a really helpful command called cargo format, which I think they took a page out of Golang's book and introduced this feature, which helps ensure that Rust code is all sort of uniformly formatted, which means we're no longer arguing about syntax changes. And Potatoes, you asked, did the error message change? Well, there actually wasn't an error message before. So we're actually adding the error message. The original code, and I'll go to the original code was just this enum. And so, I think I may know what you're asking about. So we're not actually, that's a good catch. We're not actually printing this out. Wow, what is that? So we return the string. So we attach the string onto the enum variant, the tuple, but we're not actually printing it out, which is quite helpful. And I don't remember with a tuple variant how this works. I'm gonna have to go look at the this error, because I think that's where this error is. What do you mean that doesn't exist? I don't remember. This does the error formatted. It's that 0 format. So I actually need to print out the string that we're passing along. And so I'm gonna do what this README tells me to do, which is just to do that, which is the formatter for the tuple there. All right, let me do a build real quick, make sure I didn't screw anything up. And then I'll get back to my point about cargo format, because I'm running I'm coming up to the end of the time that I wanted to spend doing my first pull request. A Fisher Price, my first pull request in Rust. Compile, link. Everything looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and stage some changes. I don't need that. That I want. But it's usually good to have your editor do this for you, or before you commit something, to run cargo format. And cargo format actually didn't make any changes on my code because I wrote everything in nice idiomatic Rust, so it doesn't have to change anything. But it's a really useful step to do before you commit, so that, you know, when code review's happening, that we're all sort of working from the same, I would say, basis around what this should look like. And so and I'm not going to do, you'll notice that there are these other, let me go over to this, there are these other variants here of this enum that could use the same treatment. But I'm not going to do those. I'll leave those for somebody else to do. So I'm not going to mark the issue as fixed as of yet. So and let me push my branch, and I'll go make a pull request. Whoops. This terminal window does not have my SSH agent loaded into it. This one does. So I'm going to go ahead and push this. I have a branch. And then the very, very last part of creating your first Rust pull request is actually making the pull request. So Delta RS, let me make this window a little bit bigger. Where's that tab? Delta RS uses something you'll find in a lot of other projects. We use a pull request template, which is very, very helpful. And I'm going to adjust my pull request appropriately. Can get rid of that. A lot of projects will use pull request templates or issue templates to make sure that they're getting all the information that we need. We don't need any documentation in their pull requests. Since I'm a committer, I'm going to request QP. Look at this. This all looks good. Let's create the pull request. So with that, we've got our first simple pull request in Rust. Thank you to Patatas and QP for providing some help in the chat. This is now going to have GitHub Actions run against it. We use GitHub Actions very heavily in the Delta RS community to run tests on a lot of different architectures and to do a lot of things. So I'm not going to wait for all those to complete. I'll just show you the diff of what we did. If you're just getting started with Rust, again, rustup.rs is a good place to start. That'll get you your Rust toolchain. The Rust programming language book from No Starch Press is good. It's also available on doc.wrestling.org. Please join the Slack on Delta.io. I'll pull that up again. If you go to the bottom of Delta.io, you can join the Slack, our Google group, or of course you're watching us on YouTube already. But those are really great places to get help or learn more about what we're doing here in the Delta Lake community. The Delta-RS, similar to the repository name, channel in our Slack workspace is where you can ask more questions about the Rust implementation specifically. But with that said, if you want to watch me do some live coding more, I stream irregularly, I will say, on Twitch. So that's twitch.tv/agentdero. I'll go ahead and pull that up before I call it a day. And I'm usually hacking on Delta RS. So if you want to learn more about Delta RS or the code that makes it work, or how it comes together, or how it can be used, you can follow me on Twitch. But with that said, thank you very much for watching. I'm happy to answer more questions in Slack, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.